Chapter 13, Part 2. "No," he said. "I should be sure you were a dream if you went. If you are real, sit down on that big footstool and talk. I want to hear about you." Mary put down her candle on the table near the bed and sat down on the cushioned stool. She did not want to go away at all. She wanted to stay in the mysterious, hidden-away room and talk to the mysterious boy. "What do you want me to tell you?" she said. He wanted to know how long she had been at Misselthwaite. He wanted to know which corridor her room was on. He wanted to know what she had been doing, if she disliked the moor as he disliked it, where she had lived before she came to Yorkshire. She answered all these questions and many more, and he lay back on his pillow and listened. He made her tell him a great deal about India and about her voyage across the ocean. She found out that because he had been an invalid, he had not learned things as other children had. One of his nurses had taught him to read when he was quite little, and he was always reading and looking at pictures in splendid books. Though his father rarely saw him when he was awake, he was given all sorts of wonderful things to amuse himself with. He never seemed to have been amused, however. He could have anything he asked for, and was never made to do anything he did not like to do. "Everyone is obliged to do what pleases me," he said indifferently. "It makes me ill to be angry. No one believes I shall live to grow up." He said it as if he was so accustomed to the idea that it had ceased to matter to him at all. He seemed to like the sound of Mary's voice. As she went on talking, he listened in a drowsy, interested way. Once or twice she wondered if he were not gradually falling into a doze. But at last he asked a question which opened up a new subject. "How old are you?" he asked. "I am 10, answered Mary, forgetting herself for the moment, "and so are you." "How do you know that?" he demanded in a surprised voice. "Because when you were born, the garden door was locked and the key was buried, and it has been locked for 10 years. I have a tickle in my throat. Excuse me. Colin half sat up, turning toward her, leaning on his elbows. "What garden door was locked? Who did it? Where was the key buried?" he exclaimed, as if he were suddenly very much interested. It was the garden Mr. Craven hates," said Mary nervously. "He locked the door. No one knew where he buried the key." "What sort of a garden is it?" Colin persisted eagerly. "No one has been allowed to go into it for 10 years, was Mary's careful answer. But it was too late to be careful. He was too much like herself. He, too, had had nothing to think about, and the idea of a hidden garden attracted him, as it had attracted her. He asked question after question. Where was it? Had she never looked for the door? Had she never asked the gardeners? "They won't talk about it," said Mary. "I think they have been told not to answer questions." "I would make them," said Colin. "Could you?" Mary faltered, beginning to feel frightened. If he could make people answer questions, who knew what might happen? "Everyone is obliged to please me. I told you that," he said. "If I were to live, this place would sometime belong to me. They all know that. I would make them tell me." Mary had not known that she herself had been spoiled, but she could see quite plainly that this mysterious boy had been. He thought that the whole world belonged to him. How peculiar he was, and how coolly he spoke of not living. "Do you think you won't live?" she asked, partly because she was curious, and partly in hope of making him forget the garden. "I don't suppose I shall," he answered as indifferently as he had spoken before. "Ever since I remember anything, I've heard people say I shan't. At first they thought I was too little to understand, and now they think I don't hear. But I do. My doctor is my father's cousin. He is quite poor, and if I die, he will have all Misselthwaite when my father is dead. I should think he wouldn't want me to live." "Do you want to live?" inquired Mary. "No," he answered in a cross, tired fashion, "but I don't want to die. When I feel ill, I lie here and think about it until I cry and cry." I have heard you crying 3 times, Mary said, but I did not know who it was. Were you crying about that? She did so want him to forget about the garden. I dare say, he answered. Let us talk about something else. Talk about the garden. Don't you want to see it? Yes, answered Mary in quite a low voice. I do, he went on persistently. I don't think I ever really wanted to see anything before, but I want to see that garden. I want the key dug up. I want the door unlocked. I would let them take me there in my chair. That would be getting fresh air. I am going to make them open the door. He had become quite excited, and his strange eyes began to shine like stars and looked more immense than ever. They have to please me, he said. I will make them take me there, and I will let you go too. Mary's hands clutched each other. Everything would be spoiled, everything. Dickon would never come back. She would never again feel like a missel thrush with a safe, hidden nest. Oh, don't do that, she cried out. He stared as if he thought she had gone crazy. Why? He exclaimed. You said you wanted to see it. I do, she answered almost with a sob in her throat, but if you make them open the door and take you in like that, it will never be a secret again. Well, now I've lost my place. Hold on. Oh. He leaned still farther forward. A secret, he said. What do you mean? Tell me. Mary's words almost tumbled over one another. You see, she panted, if no one knows but ourselves, if there was a door hidden somewhere under the ivy, if there was, and if we could find it, if we could slip through it together and shut it behind us, and no one knew anyone was inside it, and we called it our garden and pretended that we were missel thrushes and it was our nest, and if we played there almost every day and dug and planted seeds and made it come alive. Is it dead? He interrupted her. It soon will be if no one cares for it, she went on. The bulbs will live, but the roses... He stopped again, as excited as she was herself. What are bulbs? He said quickly. They are daffodils and lilies and snowdrops. They are working in the earth now, pushing up pale green points because spring is coming. Is the spring coming? He said. What is it like? You don't see it in rooms if you are ill. It is the sun shining on the rain and the rain falling on the sunshine and things pushing up and working under the earth, said Mary. If the garden was a secret and we could get into it, we could watch the things grow bigger every day and see how many roses are alive. Don't you see? But don't you see how much nicer it would be if it were a secret? He dropped back on his pillow and lay there with an odd expression on his face. I have never had a secret, he said, except that one about not living to grow up. They don't know I know that, so it's a sort of a secret, but I like this kind better. If you won't make them take you to the garden, pleaded Mary, perhaps I feel almost sure I can find out how to get in sometime, and then, if the doctor wants you to go out in your chair, and if you can always do what you want to do, well, then perhaps we might find some boy who would push you, and we could go alone, and it would always be a secret garden. I should like that, he said very slowly, his eyes looking dreamy. I should like that. I should not mind fresh air in a secret garden. Mary began to recover her breath and feel safer because the idea of keeping the secret seemed to please him. She felt almost sure that if she kept on talking and could make him see that the garden in his mind, as she had seen it, he would like it so much that he could not bear to think that anybody might tramp into it when they chose. I'll tell you what I think it would be like if we could go into it, she said. It has been shut up so long, things have grown into a tangle, perhaps. He lay quite still and listened while she went on talking about the roses, which... It's 21 hours. Oh, yes, my computer likes to tell me what time it is. He lay quite still and listened while she went on talking about the roses which might have clambered from tree to tree and hung down, about the many birds which might have built their nests there because it was so safe. And then she told him about the robin and Ben Weatherstaff, and there was so much to tell about the robin, and it was so easy and safe to talk about it all that she ceased to be afraid. The robin pleased him. so much that he smiled as he looked down on the beautiful, and he looked almost beautiful, and at first Mary had thought that he was even plainer than herself with his big eyes and heavy locks of hair. "I did not know birds could be like that," he said. "But if you stay in a room, you never see things, but a lot of things you know. I feel as if you had been inside that garden." She did not know what to say, so she did not say anything. He evidently did not expect an answer, and the next moment he gave her a surprise. "I am going to let you look at something," he said. "Do you see that rose-colored silk curtain hanging on the wall over the mantelpiece?" Mary had not noticed it before, but she looked up and saw it. It was a curtain of soft silk hanging over what seemed to be some picture. "Yes," she answered. "There is a cord hanging from it," said Colin. "Go and pull it." Mary got up, much mystified, and found the cord. When she pulled it, the silk curtain ran back on rings, and when it ran back, it uncovered a picture. It was the picture of a girl with a laughing face. She had bright hair tied up with a blue ribbon, and her gay, lovely eyes were exactly like Colin's unhappy ones, agate gray, and looking twice as big as they really were because of the black lashes all around them. "She's my mother," said Colin complainingly. "I don't see why she died. Sometimes I hate her for doing it." "How queer," said Mary. "If she had lived, I believe I should not have been ill always," he grumbled. "I dare say I should have lived, too, and my father would not have hated to look at me. I dare say I should have had a strong back. Draw the curtain again." Mary did as she was told and returned to her footstool. "She is much prettier than you," she said, "but her eyes are just like yours. At least, they are the same shape and color. Why is the curtain drawn over her?" He moved uncomfortably. "I made them do it," he said. "Sometimes I don't like to see her looking at me. She smiles too much when I am ill and miserable. Perhaps... Well, besides, she is mine, and I don't want anyone to see her." There were a few moments of silence, and then Mary spoke. "What would Mrs. Medlock do if she found out that I had been here?" she inquired. "She would do as I told her to do," he answered. "And I should tell her that I wanted you to come here and talk to me every day. I am glad you came." "So am I," said Mary. "I will come as often as I can, but," she hesitated, "I shall have to go look every day for the garden door." "Oh, yes, you must," said Colin, "and you can tell me about it afterward." He lay thinking a few moments, as he had done before, and then he spoke again. "I think that you shall be a secret too," he said. "I will not tell them until they find out. I can always send the nurse out of the room and say that I want to be by myself. Do you know Martha?" "Yes, I know her very well," said Mary. "She waits on me." He nodded his head toward the outer corridor. "She is the one who was asleep in the other room. The nurse went away yesterday to stay all night with her sister, and she always makes Martha attend me when she goes out. Martha shall tell you when to come here." Then Mary understood Martha's troubled look when she had asked questions about the crying. "Martha knew about you the whole time," she said. "Yes, she often attends me. The nurse likes to get away from me, and then Martha comes." "I have been here a long time," said Mary. "Shall I go away now? Your eyes look sleepy." "I wish I could go to sleep before you leave me," he said rather shyly. "Well, shut your eyes," said Mary, drawing her footstool closer, "and I will do what my ayah used to do in India. I will pat your hand and stroke it and sing something quite low." "I should like that, perhaps," he said drowsily. Somehow she was sorry for him and did not want him to lie awake, so she leaned against the bed and began to stroke and pat his hand and sing a very low little chanting song in Hindustani. "That is nice," he said, more drowsily still, and she went on chanting and stroking, but when she looked at him again, his black lashes were lying close against his cheeks, for his eyes were shut and he was fast asleep. So she got up softly, took her candle, and crept away without making a sound. And that is the end of chapter 13.